Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. So, dear ones, here we are on a Saturday morning studying or listening to Swami Prabhavananda talk about overcoming obstacles in spiritual life. And that is, if anyone knew the answer to that question, knew how to do that, it was certainly Swami Prabhavananda. If you knew about him as a young man, he was agnostic. He was a college student, very successful college student, very brilliant boy. But he was a revolutionary, helping transport arms through Kolkata. He would they would come and put them through his window. He would put them under his bed until late at night somebody else would come. These were rifles and ammunition that had been stolen from the British. I mean, this was a hanging offense that he was committing, and so he would then. A cart would roll up outside his window, and he would put these rifles and ammunition back out through the window. And so the people who stole them no longer had them, couldn't be traced to them. And the people who got them took them outside the city and so on. And it was a very interesting story. In the 1940s, Swami Prabhavananda was visited more than once by the FBI here in the United States. And once he was asked, would you accept money to help the British, the anti-British revolutionaries in India? And he said, why would I ask money for something I would do for free? So that was our dear Swami Prabhavananda. So when I say that this was a man who knew about obstacles and overcoming obstacles, we can take him very seriously. We can take him very seriously. So we'll start here. Distractions or obstacles can be overcome only by practice, by concentrating on a single thought, a single truth, the truth of God. Make that practice your habit, concentrating on a single truth, the truth of God. This is satyagraha. This is insistence on truth. This is the heart of meditation, and it is of all forms of meditation, including nididhyasana, the practice within the jnana philosophy. Insistence on the truth. And he says, make that practice your habit, insisting on the truth. And over time, this overcomes our lower ways of thinking. And when we overcome our lower ways of thinking, that automatically changes our way of behaving. When our thoughts change, our speech changes, and our behavior changes. So the Swami is not just, this is not theoretical, this has very practical consequences. Going back to the Swami's talk, in the process of evolution, nothing is in the human being, nothing in the human being exists in the, nothing in the human being exists in the worm that crawls. Sorry, this is just in the process of evolution. Nothing, nothing is added. What is already there in the potential form becomes unfolded gradually. The intelligence that you find evolved in the human being exists in the worm that crawls underfoot. But through the process of evolution, that intelligence has become unfolded. Now, of course, this is absolutely fundamental truth from the Upanishads, from the Gita, from the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, and the teachings of Vivekananda. Swami Yogeshananda, who founded this center, put it this way: consciousness is primary and is not plural. The plurality the plurality that we experience is nothing more than that, a projection of our ideas of name and form on consciousness. So what exists in the worm, or even that which forms the worm, becomes unfolded, evolved. It is involute in the worm and evolved in human beings, and it goes on to become even more evolved, as the Swami will tell us. Christhood or Buddhahood is nothing special or unique. What an astounding statement. Christhood or Buddhahood is nothing special or unique. It is only that we all have to unfold that Christhood. God in his infinite degree. His all perfection is dwelling within each individual soul. You and I are never separate from God. As Swami Vivekananda pointed out, in all your life, you have seen nothing but God, but you have to be aware of that. So this is that insistence on truth that the Swami, when I said distraction can be overcome by insistence on a single truth, that all of what you experience is the divine and nothing but. We have to be aware of that. There are two words in Sanskrit, oh my, nishkama,
Kama.
Nishkama and Purushkara.
Purana Kama.
Purnakama. Purnakama, okay. Nishkama means to be desireless. And Purnakama, kama, Purnakama means the fulfillment of a desire. They both mean the same thing. In other words, as long as you have cravings for the objective world, you cannot have fulfillment. When you renounce all cravings and desires, and by such renunciation you raise a positive desire for God in yourself, you find fulfillment. Now notice that the Swami is talking about a process here. He says these two words. He says, nishkama. Nishkama means to be desireless. And purnakama means the fulfillment of a desire, of all desire. Purna, in other words, full. Purnakama. They both mean the same thing. In other words, as long as you have cravings for the objective world, you cannot have fulfillment. When you renounce all cravings and desires, and by such renunciation, you raise a positive desire for God in yourself, you find fulfillment. Now, does this mean that you have to retire to the forest or a cave? No, not at all. Sri Ramakrishna said, and Vivekananda underlined and explained in detail, that such renunciation can be mental. And by explain in detail, I mean if you want to read this explanation in detail, you can read Swami's inspired talks, Swami Vivekananda's inspired talks. He explains in detail about mental renunciation, that you do not have to leave the world, you do not have to you simply have to renounce attachment and aversion to all of those things that you are attached to and averse to. When you raise that positive desire for God in yourself, which spontaneously arises when you set aside these other obstacles of aversion and attachment, and all of their kin. When you set those aside, spontaneously there arises in yourself a positive desire for God, and you find fulfillment. Where your consciousness is, there is what you experience. This is an article of faith by the Hatha Yogi. Where you put your prana is where your awareness will be. So they practice doing this through the asanas. They practice with the body, but the body and the mind are not separate. So when we're doing this same thing mentally, I'm no longer practicing the asanas, doing the same thing mentally. What happens is that changes us in the same way that Hatha Yoga changes us physically and changes our mind. When we change our mind, our psyche also changes. Our subtle self also changes. So what the Swami says, where your consciousness is, that there is what you experience. As long as we are in ignorance and have only the physical senses experience, that is the truth. Notice he doesn't say it's a falsehood. It is our satya. It is our truth, as long as we remain there. But when we raise our consciousness, we see nothing but God or Spirit. Swamiji's example, Swami Vivekananda's example, is that a baby is lying in a room and a thief comes and steals something. The baby does not see a thief because thieving is not in the baby. The baby doesn't know anything about possession of whatever is there. So someone comes and takes it. It means nothing to the baby because the baby doesn't see theft. A baby is in a room and a thief comes in and steals something. The baby does not see a thief because thieving is not in the baby. We see someone as bad because we see the reflection of what is in us. But if the vision has been opened, then we see no sinner or saint. We see only God. Notice, we see someone is bad because we see the reflection of what is in us. But if the vision has been opened, then we see no sinner or saint. We see only God. And this is the insistence on truth that the Swami was talking about when we began this reading. Now, what is the main obstacle? We read in the Bible, the light shineth in darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. The Hindu or Buddhist saint calls this avidya, ignorance. The light shined in the darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. The Hindu or Buddhist saint calls this avidya, ignorance. Ignorance covering the light. And not only does it cover the light, but it creates something which has no reality, the sense of ego. When we're groping around in the darkness, naturally we come to the conclusion that we are the ones groping around in the darkness. And it's unhappy, and it's unfulfilling, and it leaves us full of anxiety and woe. Sometimes there's happiness, yes, and the tragedy is we yearn to repeat that happiness, rather than just experiencing and letting it go, as Jesus said, be passers-by. We yearn to have it again because we in the darkness, we want something that alleviates the pain. We don't understand that it is the darkness that is creating the pain. So, as it says in the last lines of the evening hymn, Breaker of this world's chain, we salute thee, though we are blind. Come to the heart's dark cave and illumine, thou light of the light. Not only does the darkness cover the light, but it creates something which has no reality, the sense of ego. Now, intuitively, we know there is something that is creating individuality. But there's only one. It's only consciousness. There's only one ahamkara. As we see it dimly reflected in the darkness that is our experience, we think, oh, that's me. That's me that is doing this. That's me that is the doer. That's me that is coping with this. As the Swami is telling us, it's not true. As Sri Ramakrishna said, try to find what your ego is. Just try to find what your ego is. Just like an onion, peel layer after layer to find out what is inside. You find nothing. And this is the process of contemplation, concentration, and meditation, is peeling away layer after layer. We see the contents of our waking awareness, and we see, oh, well, this can't be the whole truth. This is a lesser truth somehow. It's not that it's untrue, it's just not the truth, the whole truth. And then we come to our active subconscious as we sink lower below the level of our left mind thoughts. Then we see, there's something else here, there's something else here. And we come to the conclusion that true too is a transient, temporary reality. It's always changing. And so finally we come to, in the silence, we come to that which is not changing. This, when the mirror, as Chaitanya says, the mirror of the heart is wiped clean and quenched that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. When we stop looking outward, when we look inward deeply enough, we find, here is a truth that does not change. So Sri Ramakrishna said, try to find what your ego is. Just like an onion, peel layer after layer to find out what is inside you. You find nothing. Similarly, ask yourself, am I this body? Am I the mind? Am I the senses? Am I a combination of these? You will find that they are all shining. They are all shifting and vanishing, all in flux. You will find they are all shifting and vanishing, all are in flux. The body, the mind, the senses. Why? Because they're made of the gunas, and the gunas are constantly changing. We think we are this. No, this is the creation of the gunas. Sri Krishna explains it very thoroughly in chapters 2 and 3, actually 2 through 6. Yet because of a sense of ego, there is attachment to things and objects and persons that give us pleasure, and aversion to those that give us suffering. There is a clinging to this surface life, and it is universal, a universal ignorance. And that's why we must never feel badly about ourselves for our ignorance. It's simply a matter that we're born to it. Without it, the universe could not exist. Holy Mother tells that story. We do not want to give up what we enjoy through our senses and consider so real. Though our goal is to be God-men or God-women, and while living in this body, we can attain that. Notice that the Swami repeats the promise that is there over and over. Our goal is to be God-men or God-women, and while living in this body, we can attain that. There is a great obstacle in the way. The Katha Upanishad says, the self-existent made the senses turn outward. Now, are we to blame the self-existent? No. We are to remind ourselves we are the self-existent. We are that. We are that which made the senses turn outward. There's no other one that made it happen. So when we awaken to the point that we see this happening, then we can change. So the Katha Upanishad says, the self-existent made the senses turn outward. Accordingly, man looks toward what is without and sees not what is within. Rare is he who, longing for immortality, shuts his eyes to what is without and beholds the self. Now, why is it rare? Because we are on a continuum. There is no borderline between the world of matter and the senses and the world of the subtle and the spirit. We are moving along that continuum, that spectrum. And when we get to a certain point, as it's put here, we begin to yearn for immortality. That is to say, to no longer be imprisoned by this cage of flesh and bone, to no longer be forced by that which we have created to look outward. So we begin to look to something beyond. As it's said in Chaitanya's prayer, or this is so touching, if you just let your mind rest on this statement, how huge then is my wretchedness, who find in this empty life and heart no devotion to thy name. Because Chaitanya says that the name and chanting in the name is the key to wiping clean the heart and quenching the mighty forest fire, worldly lust. And so we begin to bathe in his name, that bath for weary souls. We come to the conclusion, how huge then is my wretchedness, who find in this empty life and heart no devotion to thy name. So we begin to yearn for the devotion. And when we begin to yearn for the devotion comes. When Christ says, ask and ye shall receive, and Sri Ramakrishna says, practice just a little and someone will come forward to help you. This is an exactly parallel promise from each of these great teachers. This will happen for us. As aspirants, we pass through different stages to reach the goal. First, we search here and there and everywhere. And then at last we realize that what we're seeking is to be found within. We learn to practice spiritual disciplines. And then obstacles come. First, there's mental laziness. And naturally, doubt arises. Of course, doubt arises. We've been groping around in the darkness, but somehow coping for so long, we think, well, wait a minute, why should I give up this for that? How can I be sure that that'll be better? Doubts arise. Of course they arise. Doubt arises. Am I not fooling myself? What is this closing my eyes and trying to focus my thoughts on God? Do I know anything of God? Swami Sarada, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, was asked by one of his disciples, how can I meditate on God if I don't know what God is? Swami Sarada, isn't that a very legitimate question? How can I concentrate my attention, my awareness on God if I don't know what God is? Swami Saradananda answered, look here, if you know what God is, you don't have to meditate. So this is where we begin to rely on the promises of the great teachers. Ask and ye shall receive. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. If you ask your Father for bread, will he give you a stone? If you ask for a fish, will he give you a serpent? Sri Ramakrishna, practice just a little and someone will come forward to help you. And eventually Sri Ramakrishna says that someone, who he identifies as Kali, will tell you everything, will tell you everything. And many saints from many traditions say the same thing. When we apply ourselves, and Sri Ramakrishna says, I am the refuge. I am the refuge. I am, and as Vivekananda put it, the breaker of this world's chain. This, the Swami in his humor says, this business of thinking that you have to know God before you can meditate on God, he says it's like a person who insists on learning to swim before getting into the water. Though we know what vanity of vanity, though we know that vanity of vanity, all is vanity, still old habits come back and our mind runs after sense pleasures again and again. We can't help it. Now, notice the compassion. We're never to think badly of ourselves for our missteps, our failing to reach our best potential. No, it's quite natural. We can't help it, the Swami says. We built ourselves this way. We, the divine being, built these action and experience suits this way. And that's why it's so important to read the Gita, particularly chapters 2 through 6. Sri Krishna explains very thoroughly. So the Swami Prabhavananda says, so we have to keep this sort of discrimination at the door. At the door, what does he mean? When something comes in through the senses, what do we do with it? Do we relegate it to its proper place? Do we renounce it? Or do we attach ourselves to it? Do we once again revel in it? If we do, then we say, all right, that happened again. I'll go forward. But so we have to keep this sort of discrimination at the door. And then there is another great obstacle, despair, caused by the failure to concentrate. We've all experienced it. I once spoke of it to Swami Sarvadevananda as mud mind. Day after day went by. I was coming to the Hollywood Temple in the mornings. I would get there before 7 o'clock and sit for concentration and practice of meditation, and nothing. The mind was just like, as I said to him, like mud mind. And he said, pay no attention to it. Just keep doing your practices. But oh, did I experience that despair? When I spoke to him, when I finally spoke up to him, I was quite dejected. This great obstacle, despair, caused by the failure to concentrate. What is the remedy for all these obstacles? There is one remedy: bundle them together. My master used to say, practice, practice, practice. So you just roll all of this outward turningness, despair, all of this, you roll it up in a bundle and say, all right, I'm tucking it under my arm, and I'm going to go forward. I'm going to practice, practice, practice. That is the only way. And notice that the Swami says the only way. That is the only way to overcome all these obstacles. He would repeat again and again his one answer: meditate, 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 practice, practice, practice. And you are bound to succeed. Let's stop there and take some time to do the manana on together, consider together what we've heard and what it gives rise to in you. Please be forthcoming. This is how we do this together. This is how we study the art of spirituality together. Please share your thoughts, your questions, your comments, anything at all.
I have a question.
Yes, dear.
First, before I ask it, Nira is said that she's having trouble hearing you. I'm not. I think it could be on her end, but I just wanted to ask if anybody else is having trouble hearing Brother Shankara.
No, I hear him just fine.
Okay, Nira, I'm sorry, but it's got to be something on your end because I can't even turn the volume all the way up. It's too loud. So
Yes,
it's okay to me.
thank you. We'll try and next time we will try a different device.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I think there's two volume settings though. There's actually one on your tray, and there's another one in your Internet Explorer. One of them might be low.
Oh, okay.
Yes, thanks, Brahmadas.
Thank you, Brahmadas. All
And
right, Cindy, you had something else.
so my question early on in the reading, I think this was a comment rather than part of the reading, but it was that none of us are separate from God.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just my question. If none of us are actually separate from God, then can we also say that in that same way, none of us are separate from each other?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
I like that
As a
answer.
matter of fact, Einstein, who came at this from a scientific but also a metaphysical point of view. You know, he was a philosopher as well as a discoverer. He said separation is a complete illusion. When anything in the universe vibrates, the whole universe vibrates.
I'll get one more.
We are not separate from one another. Now, Vijay, now we're hearing you and Nira.
Sorry.
So yes, we are not separate from one another. We are the one. We have created this. We have created this in order to experience this. This is what Krishna tells us in the Gita. This is what the Upanishads tell us. But what does Christ say? I am the vine. You are the branches. The branches are not separate from the vine. They're not separate from one another. I am the vine, ye are the branches. And so, no, we're not separate. We appear to be separate because we wanted it so. We wanted the experience of being many. Now, Swami Vivekananda says it's pointless to ask why. He says this both in Jnana Yoga and he says it in his inspired talks. It's pointless to ask why. We can't understand the cosmic mind. The finite mind can never understand the motivations of the infinite mind. So we simply accept it. We did that. We as that, capital T, we as that, did that. And now we have this. And when we are weary of it, when that ache becomes strong in us to end this delusion, we can do it, and we can do it in this lifetime. Over and over and over, the teachers say. You do not have to go through hundreds of lifetimes more. You don't have just, and as the Swami said, how do we do it? We insist on the truth. We insist on the truth. And we insist on the truth as it appeals to us. We insist on the truth as it appeals to us, in the words that make most sense to us. We insist on that truth. And as we insist on that truth, what happens? The darkness slowly and slowly is recognized until it finally, we understand, we see how clearly we are in the darkness. And then at some point, as Sri Ramakrishna says, it's like striking a match in a room that has been dark 1,000 years. Does the darkness disappear little by little? No, it disappears all at once. So we plead with the Master. We plead with whatever it is, whatever of the divine being appeals to our heart, our chosen ideal. We can plead with that. Strike that match. Strike that match. Dispel the darkness. Come to the heart's dark cave and illumine thou light of the light. That last line of Breaker of this world's chain. But first we have to understand we're groping around in the darkness otherwise. We have to grasp that fully and stop believing in the darkness as our reality. It's a reality, but it's not the reality of which we are capable that will free us from the pain and anguish of groping about in the darkness. Thank you, Cindy. Anyone else?
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes, Vijay.
Sometimes it is difficult for me to have uninterrupted meditation without chatter in the mind. So I have resorted to something which somehow gives me satisfaction, but I do not know if that is right or not, and that is, as much as I have extreme faith in Thakur, I try to see his presence in whatever is happening, wherever I am, whatever I am doing. Does that adequately take place of my not being able to concentrate long enough in the puja room at one time in one sitting?
Well, certainly what you're doing is you've replaced that form of meditation that is attached to Raja Yoga, which is the kind that we practice in the shrine room, as you say, sitting quietly and pulling our thoughts together. Another way of doing it is called nididhyasana. You've concluded that the truth as expressed, that everything is the work and action of the divine presence. You are insisting on that truth. That is nididhyasana. That is a jnani's way of doing this, until finally the mind becomes convinced. Finally, it's a difficult path because the mind is so persistent. And so the recommendation from here is that you do both. Don't give up on the shrine. Keep practicing. Keep practicing. Slowly and slowly, your time of concentration will increase. But this bhakti idea that it's Thakur doing everything, and then using that bhakti idea in a jnani's way, insisting that that's the truth over and over, doing that too is also very efficacious. So fine, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Brother Shankara?
Yes?
The question, that word vanity has confused me often. Is vanity same as ego? And
No,
second question,
no, vanity is rajas. It leads, the combination of materialism and vanity leads to ego. The ego, we keep focusing on ego. It's just realize it's just a mirage. It's not a truth. There's only one. There's only one. But that one, which exists within each of us, called the Atman, has projected this other reality. And then, because of its having done that, and the darkness that must come with the light, there cannot be light without darkness and vice versa, then we have this notion of I. It simply doesn't exist, as Sri Ramakrishna pointed out. If you just look at it closely, it doesn't exist. There's only one I maker, the one, the divine presence. But it's reflected in all of these sheaths of our body. And so we have this hall of mirrors made of 5 mirrors, these 5 koshas, we have this hall of mirrors in which the divine presence is reflected, and we think the reflection is us. When you look in a mirror, is that reflection you see in the mirror you? Well, you know perfectly well it's not you. So we must stop believing in what we see in the mirror, particularly since the mirror is dirty, as Swami Sridharananda puts it. It's dirty with all of the results of our experiences of many, many lifetimes. And so not only do we see a reflection, but we see a distorted reflection. If we saw the pure, when we are capable of seeing, when the heart's mirror is clean and we see the pure reflection, we know perfectly well that's not the body and the mind and the intellect, that's the divine being, and we're overwhelmed.
Thank you very much.
The ego, just keep insisting to yourself, PJ, and all of us, this sense of independent individual self is just a way of dealing with the darkness that we have created for ourselves. It's not the truth. It's a lower truth. As Swami Vivekananda said, we do not move from error to truth. If you will, we move from lower truth to higher truth. So there is a reflection that is a lower truth, but it's not the truth. It's not the truth that will free us from the darkness.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
I'm glad the Swami recognizes the problem of despair, because that's a big problem we normal people face.
Well, what do you mean, we normal people? You're
mean-
not a normal people. You're not a normal person.
We're not
No
Swamis, we're
normal-
not God-realized masters.
The normal people aren't sitting here with us on a Saturday morning pursuing this. Don't ever make yourself. I mean, as the Baal Shem Tov said, it is the achievement of a lifetime to understand that we are common and unlearned. But that doesn't mean that there's something wrong. That despair happens, this kind of despair only happens to spiritual aspirants. Other kinds of despair happen to people who are, and does it mean that spiritual aspirants are better people? No, they're just different people. They're different people, but they're certainly not normal people. And believe me, all of us, every one of us sitting here together this morning, understand about this despair. I can guarantee it.
Right.
And it's because of our impatience. Our impatience is just another way of distracting ourselves. We have so many ways of distracting ourselves. Our impatience is one. And it just is it's a restlessness of the mind. We rather than insisting on the truth within the moment we're sitting here, we project ourselves into some other moment in which we'll be enlightened. And we say, oh, I haven't achieved that yet. So despair is the result of impatience.
And also
Are we
the
to feel-
COVID, pandemic contributes to it too, because it's just been going on month after month after month, and it just seems like it's never ending, you know?
Oh, yes, indeed. And indeed, that is exactly it. And it is a challenge to us. It is a challenge to our ability to adapt. And it is very hard for us to deal with what is necessary in this dreadful transformation that's going on. Mother is correcting. It says in the Chandi, Mother, it is your nature to subdue the conduct of the wicked. Well, that's what's happening.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
going back to the assertion a while ago that ego is a projection of the Atman.
No, I did not say that. Ego is not a projection of the Atman. Ego is a projection of the five koshas. The Atman projects nothing. It witnesses everything. If you understood me to say that it's a projection of the Atman, I either misspoke or you misunderstood. It's not a projection of the Atman.
Thank you for saying that. And
we created the circumstances in which we as the Atman, we as the divine presence, created the circumstances in which this confusion arises. But it's not a projection of the Atman. The Atman does not project.
Thank you. That was the
reason. The mind projects.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
But Brother Shankara, mind projects and reveals and also concealing power, both.
Well, the mind is made up of three gunas.
Yes. Right.
The goodness, sattva, materialism, tamas, and vanity, rajas. This is how it's classified and identified by Holy Mother. We're compounded of goodness. That's our predominant aspect. But there are also, in her words, profuse quantities of materialism, tamas, and vanity, rajas. And so the three together are necessary for us to exist as action and experience beings. Anything else?
Excuse me, the follow-up comment. Are the gunas same as, we say Maya is eternal? It was always existing and will always exist. It's eternal. Is the gunas also eternal as long as...
This is the way it's understood, yes. Vivekananda says, and he explains this in great detail in the lectures he gave in London, which are collected as Jnana Yoga, which we're studying on Wednesday night. He says, in the time of no manifestation, the gunas exist, everything exists in potential form. But the gunas are in perfect equilibrium. Mm-hmm. And when they are in perfect equilibrium, there is no manifestation. This is in the terms that physics uses, this is absolute zero. No vibration whatsoever. Vibration is heat. Heat is measured by our heat measuring way of thinking. When there is no vibration, this is absolute zero, or the gunas are in perfect equilibrium. Then the thought arises in the cosmic mind, and as the sage Vishishta says, nothing actually happens Nothing real actually happens. The thought arises in the cosmic mind, I am one, I shall become many. And so the dream of manyness begins to resonate through the cosmic mind. This puts the gunas, according to Swami Vivekananda, this puts the gunas into a state of disequilibrium. And they combine and recombine and combine and recombine, and now we have Maya. Something is happening. But remember, Maya is illusory. Maya is a dream. It's Brahman's dream, so it's very powerful and therefore very compelling. It's so believable because it's meant to be believed. So the gunas combine and recombine, and now this is still in subtle form. This is still behind, so to speak, manifestation. The Big Bang has not happened yet. So they combine and recombine and combine and recombine and combine and recombine and combine and recombine. And this then results in something called Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg. Within this cosmic confinement, and please don't ask me to explain, there is no explaining how Hiranyagarbha is. It simply is, it's a concept, it's not a reality, so it can't be explained precisely. But it is a confinement of this combining and recombining of the gunas. And it finally becomes so intense, it can no longer be contained. And Hiranyagarbha bursts. This is analogous to, not precisely the same as, but analogous to what the physicists call the Big Bang. Because what emerges from the Big Bang is not a thing, it's a state of being called plasma, inconceivably hot. Vibration. Vibration has gone from subtle to gross, and now we have a state of being of intense vibration. All of Jagat, all of what we experience, condenses out of this, and the combining and recombining goes on, and this is what we call in physics terms anti-entropy, the tendency of things to become more complex and more specialized. First there was only hydrogen. Hydrogen fell together to make stars. Stars made galaxies. The stars exploded. The simple elements became, in the intense compression of these explosions, the heavier elements, and stardust was born. Out of stardust was born planets, and out of planets and stardust was born beings. Human beings are part of that. Remember, though, this is all a dream. This is, as Vashishta says to Rama, and this is part of those 30,000 shlokas, but it's key, it's absolutely key. Vashishta says to Rama, nothing actually happened. All of what you're experiencing is only a vibration of consciousness. So your awareness, the awareness in your mind, your intellect, the 5 koshas, what you're experiencing is nothing more than a vibration of consciousness. It's not a reality. But then what did Rama have to do? He had to go ahead and fulfill his mission, which was full of hardship and sorrow and suffering, and Sita was separated from him, and Ravana had to be defeated. The dream goes on. We're part of it and experiencing it right this moment.
So from birth to birth, just like, the sanskaras go with us with the subtle body, do the gunas also go with the subtle body?
Don't think of the gunas as something that are yours personally, dear.
Oh, okay.
Everything is composed of the gunas, but the gunas are not something that goes with you. The gunas are constantly there. They're what make everything. Everything that we experience, this dream existence, is made of the dream trio of gunas. Remembering always.
So they don't belong to the individual.
No.
Okay, I was thinking.
They are mother's and mother's own. Mother is the creative force, the sustaining force, the destructive force of this dream. And this is why Sri Ramakrishna says, you can read it starting on page 132 of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. That steamer trip that he takes on, he says, if you analyze it, even mother herself, Kali herself, is a dream.
But when we say, sometimes I'm feeling tamasic, I'm feeling sattvic, you attribute those gunas to oneself.
You attribute the effect of the guna to yourself, not the guna itself.
Oh, okay.
The effect of the guna in your awareness.
I see. Thank you for the clarification.
Well, the more we try to think that we possess things, Neera, the more we're in error. It's not that we're bad and wrong, it's just a mistake. We are nothing but this dream. We own nothing. It seems to us that we own. It seems to us that we have possessions and all of this. But just think, in just a few years, 20 years at the most for this, all of this will be left behind. All of this possessing will be left behind. Whatever I seem to possess, thoughts, ideas, things, all left behind. It's an illusion. And so we experience the effects of the gunas on our samskaras.
Oh, okay.
That's what gives rise to our thoughts, our feelings, and our perceptions. And our projections, and our moods, and our attributes, and our tendencies. All of these things that Sri Krishna says in chapters 3 and 4 of the Gita, he says, offer all this to me. All of it, all of it, all of it. It's all mine. It only seems to you to be yours. Offer it all to me. It's not yours at all.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Very good explanation. It has raised another question in my mind, that when I look at myself, what's happening in me, what I'm doing, how I'm feeling, I have understood that to be a sum total in that moment of the composition of my gunas in terms of.
Not your gunas.
This is why I was.
Your samskaras. Your samskaras and the effect of the gunas on your samskaras. You have no gunas.
Okay.
I see.
Your samskaras, those mental impressions that you've brought with you from wherever they came, are touched on by the gunas. Think of it as wind playing through wind chimes. This one rings dully, do. That's tamas. This one rings brightly. Ooh, that's sattva. This one goes, oh, that's rajas.
So these are at the macro level, you know, the gunas.
At the gross level, yes. The effects are at the gross level.
Okay,
The causes are at the subtle level.
thank you.
This will be talked about tomorrow in the talk on Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. How we can learn to stop the effects by understanding the causes, which is what the Swami means here by having the sword of discrimination at the door. When something arises, we are able to put it in its proper place or cut it to pieces by the sword of discrimination. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, Haima.
I just have one comment. It seems, I just want to make sure I'm right. As long as there is an unhealthy ego, the discriminating power, clarity of vision, and then dropping the veils from your eyes and seeing things as they are is lacking. Is that true? It lacks.
The only word that I would substitute, dear, is unripe ego.
Right.
I don't like unhealthy because it may be a very healthy ego, but be completely mistaken.
Okay, that's unripened ego.
An unripe ego. This is the way Sri Ramakrishna characterizes it.
Okay.
It's an unripe ego.
Sounds great.
When the ego ripens through spiritual discipline and practice and satyagraha, insistence on the truth,
Yes.
then then there's clarity.
Exactly.
And he says that the ego then becomes like a shy child.
Yes. Then we see
and
things as
doesn't insist on itself.
okay.
That's what a shy child, he
Sure.
says two things are true of the shy child. They're not a prisoner of the gunas. It's like a 5-year-old child. Not a prisoner of the gunas, and it doesn't insist on itself.
Agree with
It
you.
may throw a tantrum from time to time, which indeed it will. But
We see that around in the world right now.
but it isn't a question of unhealthy.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a question of unripe. It's a question of still not sufficient knowledge of the truth.
Yeah. For some people, it doesn't seem to ripe at all for a lifetime. I see.
Oh, yes, I know, dear. And there's, as Swami Prabhavananda said, people have a right to their pain and suffering.
That's
Do
right.
not try to remove it. Sustain and comfort. Excuse me, somebody's calling because they see it's afternoon. Son, I'm going to have to call you back. I'm still in class. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
That was my beloved son calling.
I think he was calling you with some news. We just got some news on the interwebs.
Good news, I hope.
Well, I think it's good news, but Biden has won the presidency. Officially, it's all over all the major news sources.
Cheers to that.
So I'm happy. Yes, cheers to that indeed, yes. I'll bet that's why Ben was called.
I'll bet it is too.
I know this isn't a political forum, but
Well, I hope we're all happy by that news. But if you're not, then consolation and a feeling of understanding for your disappointment.
yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
May we all be in the clarity of understanding that we're in this together, and we are, as Biden said, we may be opponents, but we're not enemies.
Exactly.
We may be opponents, but we're not enemies.
So that's what a good man says. He's a pretty upright
Good
guy.
man.
Good respect
Yeah.
for him for a long time.
We are in this together, and the more we understand that, the more we understand and are compassionate with one another in the face of any and everything that happens, then we will be much happier and we will make others happy by our radiance, of compassion and understanding of our togetherness.
And we can be all united at this time and hope that any divisive forces that had erupted in the past few years, that we are all able to remove them from our daily conduct.
There's absolutely no way, as Christ said, resist not evil. The thing for us to do is be as radiant and as truthful and hold as much to the truth as we can. And that's what we present to the world, because there will be some severe disappointment. There will be some acting out here. And so we must be loving and patient and understanding that if the reverse were true, we too might be very upset. And as St. Francis of Assisi said, true compassion and love can only shine from your words and your eyes if you acknowledge that you are capable of any act.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying that.
You must not judge others for their, we can resist them in the sense of, in a social sense. Antisocial acts cannot be permitted. The disruption of society cannot be permitted. But our understanding and our compassion, we can embrace them with that, even if we do not condone or permit the antisocial acts that may be committed. So with that, I will close with this. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Perfect, whom lust could not taint, nor passion nor gold draw near, O Master of all who renounce, fill our hearts full of love for thee. Thou hast finished with fear and with doubt, standing firm in the vision of God, refuge to all who have cast fame, fortune, and friends away. Without question thou shelterest us, and the world's great sea in its wrath seems shrunk to the puddle that fills a hoofprint in the clay. Speech cannot hold thee, nor mind, yet without thee we think not nor speak. Love, who art partial to none, we are equal before thy sight. Love, who art partial to none, we are equal before thy sight. Taker away of our pain, we salute thee, though we are blind. Come to the heart's dark cave and illumine, thou light of the light. Come to the heart's dark cave and strike thy match, O light of the light. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. All beings everywhere. So, until tomorrow morning, for those of you who choose to join us, it's been so good to be with you. Tomorrow morning's talk is on Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. And he really nails point after point. And that, that will be the subject of the talk. If you want to know what the talk is about and you don't receive the newsletter, you can find it on the website or the Facebook page. So, until next time, may you go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be cheerful, and may you have peace of mind. Until tomorrow morning. Jai, 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 the Divine Presence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, dears.
Thank you.